Okay, so for this lecture today, we're going to talk a little bit about literary analysis. Yesterday, we worked our way through the kind of the beginnings of literary analysis, but really calling it that. We analyzed a short poem and tried to uncover deeper meaning, and then we talked about how to respond to literature using a CTE explanation. And so today, what we're going to talk about is what is literary analysis, but it's because it's going to be the primary mode of what we're going to do in our classroom this semester. So every time that we look at a new text, we do that through the lens of all the other things that we've read. And the more that you read, obviously, the larger your lens is. So sometimes, without even really realizing it, we begin to make comparisons of text. How is this similar to something that I've read? Or it triggers some kind of emotion that we remember from a different text before. And so every time that we look at a text this way, all sorts of these unique features in the piece that we're currently reading become visible. Ways that it says something new or making some kind of familiar or unfamiliar move or repeating something that we've seen before. So, therefore, you have to learn to read comparatively. It's a really great skill. Always acquire the habit of always reading one text in terms of another in order to notice some of the significant features. And that's really the first step of literary analysis. Now, again, we talked about this yesterday. Literature is very subjective. It's based on your individual opinions and experience, or the author's individual opinion and experience, plus the way that you interpret the text. So no two people are going to understand a given reading in exactly the same way. To be successful at literary analysis, you have to learn to be an active reader. So you have to be able to build an understanding of a text. Even when a text is difficult, you have to be able to build on your own understanding of a text. And that the best way to do that really is to always make notes, make connections as you read. Read with a pen and a notebook and a notepad close by. And I'm going to give you some suggestions today for learning how to start reading actively. Always think carefully about the beginnings and endings of sections of the text, either like the very end and the beginning and the end, and even the beginnings and ends of paragraphs. These positions are privileged for a reason, and so they usually signify some kind of important information. Pay careful attention to the tone of the author. That's the way the author approaches the text, and the mood. Made an error there. The mood, which is the feeling that the reader or you get from a text. Are there any shifts, any changes that happen within the poem or the text in tone or setting or speaker? Look for any assertions that the author repeats. A repetition is a good a signifier of something that's important. Look at any conflicts or oppositions. They usually play a critical role in moving a plot forward. Why did the author choose to title the piece the way that he or she did? That can that those these are little things that don't seem like they would have a lot of weight, but they can have a lot of significant meaning. We're going to look at that in our text that we're going to analyze today. What do you notice about the author's use of language? Are there any compelling details, vivid imagery, figurative language that trigger responses in you, strong emotions, any memories? Try to read everything more than once, always. You get better and better with every read that you do, and you uncover layers of meaning. Try to have conversations about the things that you read. Talk to your friends, talk to your classmates, look online after you read a text and see what the online community on blogs and different things have to say about text. It helps you you develop new insights from other people when you discuss literature. Try to read with resistance. You find ways to be the devil's advocate, disagree with, or complicate the author's message. It helps you uncover deeper levels of meaning. Okay? We talked yesterday about approaching text like a scientist. And you want to continue that because that helps you identify the facets and the features of the text as opposed to just having that emotional reaction to a text. So remember to be non-biased, to read a text like a scientist would be examining a specimen. Okay, we're going to look for patterns, we're going to look for common features, and make text-to-text connections. I found this actually. I stole it from somewhere else, and I just thought that it was really good, kind of step by step in the process. And so the first step is to um, uh, it's a three-step process. You have to understand, that's level 0. We'll talk about why that is in just a second. You have to notice these things, and then you have to be able to explain these things. So the first step is was listed as step 0, because you have to be able to do this step inside of your head. It's not something that you physically process, but you have to understand what you read. And in order to do that, like, do you have an active idea of what has happened in the text that you've read, an understanding of the literature, the main idea, the point? And so that's not summarizing or paraphrasing. You're just kind of analyzing the overall effect inside of your mind. This next step, or step 1, essentially, is you're going to start noticing the moves. And to do that, you need to examine the details, the smaller details, like word choice, punctuation. If you focus on the larger ideas like plot and character as a whole, it's going to lead you to summarize. And that's something that you want to avoid at all costs, because an analysis is not summary. And we want to avoid that. So good writers make these careful choices for a reason. We talked about that last semester, talked about that yesterday. Even the tiniest details are worth examining because they can pack a lot of meaning. Like when we read our poem yesterday, You Fit Into Me, there's so much meaning packed into those 4 simple lines. Good writers make careful choices. Those moves that good writers make, pay attention to those things. Any feature of a text that you find to be strange or interesting or unusual can be a really great place to focus your attention, a good jumping off point. A good close reader also asks questions. They recognize problems or have an issue with something that surfaces, and that helps us understand like confusing portions of the text when we ask questions, or when we have issues with a text. Those always are good points for beginning analysis. The next step is explaining your reasoning in literary analysis. You want to move beyond what's interesting and on to what is significant. So you're taking what was interesting to you in the text, or things that stood out to you, interesting, or you're strange, or you're unusual, and those little details, and we're going to move on to why you think the author made those particular choices. So your goal is to construct an argument about how these choices the author makes affect the text as a whole. You're not trying to read into the author's mind. You're not trying to be subjective about why he or she made the choices. Instead, your aim is really to reveal the objective effects of those choices. How do those choices drive the literature or drive the author's point? Avoid the common misconception that literary analysis is about explaining what a text means to you. The purpose is to present an argument that any careful reader of the text can understand, to help them develop their layers of meaning. Okay, so in our next lecture, we're going to take a look at a text together, The Story of an Hour, and we're going to do a literary analysis on that together.